World History students. Today's small group is going to be built around studying the Mongols, the creation of the Mongol Empire. Who were the Mongols? Who was their leadership? And why did they last as an empire? That's the focus here. The Mongols are actually going to be the largest empire in human history, at least in terms of territorial size. And they're also a very fleeting empire. They don't last a very long time, but they have a tremendous impact on the development and history of Asia as well as elsewhere. So we're going to just try to define what the Mongols were and the impact they had. So this is an overview screencast. So let's get after a very basic question. Who were they? Well, the Mongols themselves is the name for a nomadic people that originate in Central Asia. Nomadic means they travel and move to different locations with their animal herds based on the seasons of the year. And they traveled throughout this broad region that would map, roughly speaking, onto the area of Mongolia today. And that's who they were as a people. In terms of their religion, they were shamanistic. They believed in gods tied to the lands that they inhabited. And because they were nomadic, because they moved from place to place based on the season, they had animal herds and they rode horses, they had little self-production. They weren't people that were based in one place who were tied to, large and permanent agricultural productions or even that many craft and manufacturing productions. They kind of had their peak in the 1200s CE. So that's kind of the century time period that the Mongols are going to be most dominant, going to be emerging in Central Asia. And they did have strong trade relationships with others. Trade was something that they needed to do in order to survive because they weren't producers or manufacturers themselves. Who was Genghis or Genghis Khan? He's the leader who kind of converts the Mongols from a nomadic people into a conquering empire that takes over virtually all of Asia. Well, what do we know about Genghis Khan? He was born in the 1160s CE, and he was originally called Temujin. He was the son of a tribal chief, and he was born to a family that was pretty well connected, although he spent much of his early life disconnected from his biological parents who had died, and he spent a lot of his time kind of in poverty. You might say he was disadvantaged, even though he had been born to a family of a tribal chief. As a young man, he was married, but his wife was kidnapped, and young Temujin actually sought revenge for his kidnapped wife. And as the story goes, he went to seek revenge on those who had kidnapped his wife, and he never really stopped conquering after he exacted that revenge on the people that had done him wrong. He becomes a successful political leader. He's very skilled at uniting the various tribes of the different Mongol people around him. He expands the Mongol Empire to its peak, an incredible amount of conquest that we'll see right here in this picture that stretches much from the area of Central Asia where he originated, that ultimately goes to encompass much of Southwest Asia, including the areas of Persia and what would be modern-day Kazakhstan and parts of Russia. All of China is going to fall under the Mongol control, not during the life of Genghis Khan, but during the life of his descendant rulers. So let's get back to him. The Mongol Empire, as you saw, expanded to an incredible peak. It conquered all of China under his grandson, Kublai Khan. And this was an immense achievement. China had been a grand civilization that had profound cultural and physical and economic achievements, technological achievements. And this all falls under the grip of the Mongols during Kublai Khan's reign. So I'd like you to watch this excerpt that we've provided here. It tries to analyze the success of the Mongols in warfare, and that's ultimately what they were. They were a really successful conquering people because of their strategies and tactics when it came to warfare. So the question we want you to pursue here is, what practices allowed Temujin or Genghis Khan to be successful in warfare? List as many as you can. And after you're done with that, you're going to look at kind of this broad explanation here. How did the Mongols build an empire? What made them successful? Was it just the fighting? Yes, that was part of it. They, as you saw in the clip, they emphasized speed in warfare. They were skilled horsemen. They were skilled at fighting while on horseback, which is an extremely deadly combination in a pre-modern world. They were able to build this large empire ultimately because they were able to unify tribes, first under Genghis Khan, but later his descendants were able to maintain that unity. They practiced relative religious tolerance. They allowed conquered people to maintain their religious beliefs. They developed a really innovative messaging system to unify their empire that stretched across the entirety of Asia. A messaging system that tied together many trade routes, that imposed and strict laws and protections on anybody that violated trade routes and behaviors on those. So I'd like for you, and we're going to discuss this in class, but if you're virtual, you're just going to be reading this on your own. Read this description of Mongol gender relations. This is an interesting primary source from the time period. It's one of the ways that we know about life in the Mongol Empire. This is an account from a William of Rubric, a Franciscan friar who visited the Great Khan in his capital city during the 1250s on behalf of King Louis IX of France. The question we want you to consider here and write down in your notebook: how would you describe the role women played in Mongol society? It's another image that we saw earlier of the Mongol Empire at its peak. And then we would like you to watch the following Edpuzzle clip. It's not going to be an embedded video like the last because it's on Edpuzzle, on the rise and fall of the Mongol Empire. Answer all the questions in your notebook that pop up in the Edpuzzle. I believe there are 2 of them. And with that, we are complete with this screencast on the Mongols.